Boy.
Almost.
When I get old like this, it's hard.
Hey, you got
65, 70.
Look in there.
Lastly, I want more to do.
All right.
Father God, we just thank you for what you're doing amongst these men. Lord, we ask that you just speak to us and speak through us tonight. We ask that you just anoint your speaker, Heavenly Father, Mr. Paul Lessard. Just bless him, that he can just bless us with a great message. So, Father, we just thank you for everything that you're doing for each and every one of us. We thank you for what you're doing for the community of life through these men and through us together. So we thank you in Jesus' name.
Amen.
That's right.
Ready for it.
Y'all ready in there?
Hey, we have to have y'all.
Act like it's your first time. Come on now.
Part of the problem, we're not being in the community.
That's right.
You together in here.
There you go. Get in there.
1, 2, 3, break.
How long we gotta hold hands? Single man.
All right. We may not have started on time, but we started at the right time.
Come on.
I don't know if that meant something or not, but anyway, I thought it sounded cool. Thank you so much for being here tonight. You can be anywhere, and be justified in it in some sense, but the fact that you're here is amazing. Men's Huddle, we come together to share our ideas, share our gifts, share our passions for our community. So of course we get to have great speakers come and encourage, but also, as you probably already experienced before since you're back, everybody's presence here matters. Everybody's presence here encourages each other. So I'm gonna just say, I'm gonna put one little plug in here, and then we'll get right into the presentation because we do want to end on time. So one thing that I want to say that's been put on my heart that I'm noticing when men get together, and usually the men that are consistent are usually some of the few. So what I'm about to say, you can take it to heart, but also understand that you are probably men that commit to a lot of other things as well. But one of the things that's been put on my heart to say is I'm seeing a lot more of these boys at the Peace Academy. They're starting to grow up. We're seeing more boys come, and we're seeing a lot of kids that we can't reach. It's not like a code red, it's nothing like that, but I think it'd be silly to not ask for help and participation and mentors to come through now instead of waiting till we absolutely need it. And there's strength in numbers. So when we think about the Huddle, when we think about coming in and creating a think tank and having all these ideas and stuff like that, one of the main things that's always said is we want to do stuff for the youth. We want to do stuff for the youth. I'm telling you now, we might have another situation like Commander did one time. He brought 40 boys to the room. And instead of Commander bringing the boys here, what I'm asking is if you can find time where it's only Tuesdays and Thursdays to just come and see what's going down at the Peace Academy. See how you can get involved. I mean, sometimes it might just be a man coming in dropping off napkins. Like, it can be super simple. I can help you get creative with it. But I think one of the ways that we can really start applying some of this stuff and actually reaching the youth and actually having some input in this next generation is not necessarily relying on a young man like Jet, but coming to where these kids are coming. That's not a guilt speech. Like I said, I know y'all probably committed to a lot of things. But what would be amazing is if the Men's Huddle could have a presence, a consistent presence with the Peace Academy. So that's my spiel. I'm telling you now, Justin, he's there day in and day out. Denzel, he's there. Of course, Commander's there. They can tell you a blessing that it is, and a blessing that it is to see these kids and actually have real relationships that actually create an impact. So that's what I'm gonna say about that. And since he's on the phone, I'm gonna say a little bit of other stuff. I'm gonna do a dance, show you that I can pat my head and rub my belly at the same time. And then he's gonna get up and keep going. Okay, so yeah. So let's switch it up. Our speaker today is Paul Lessard. I wanted Commander to do it because I like when he tells a story. But a man that served our country, served our community, and has been a great friend to Greg Commander. And as he said before, there probably wouldn't be a men's huddle if Greg wasn't encouraged and led on and mentored by Mr. Lessard. So I'm gonna give him the mic, let him speak. So y'all will welcome him like you will welcome Commander.
I've got 2 mics here. Do I push this one away? I don't want to give you feedback. So,
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
well, tell me first, when's quitting time? Because I've learned early in my career that you don't want to talk too long to folks.
I'll give you a 5-minute warning.
So it's 6:45 right now. What time do you want to get out?
We should wrap up by 7:30.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet, but I do have some great stories, and you know, I'm really honored to be here tonight. I've loved Greg for 16 years. I'll tell you a little bit about the time we met. It's you know, God works in mysterious ways, you know, and that's really what I want to talk to you about tonight. Is that you know, God's in charge, and every time you tell him what you're going to do, he's going to laugh at you. You know, it's a lot about sitting back and listening to him. That's what I think really has been the secret in my life. You know, I'm 67 years old, almost 70 now, and I'll tell you a little bit about my story. But you know, I've had some disappointments, but what I've learned in my disappointments is God just had other plans. But let me tell you about Greg. This started back in like 2000, might have been 2000 or 1999. I've coached in this town for 23 years, coached soccer. I came here in 1975 on a soccer scholarship, played at High Point University, and I'm a Marine Corps kid. I've gone to 14 schools from kindergarten my senior year, so I was all over the place. Fortunately, I'd grown up in the Philippine Islands. My dad was a tank commander, and he had the Marine barracks in Subic Bay, and we lived right next door to the Royal Marines, so I learned soccer early, and you know, I think that was God's plan for me. Is you know, I learned how to play soccer early, and because of that, I always had friends. So every place I went, I met somebody through the game. But it was a hard way to grow up, and I always tell folks that High Point University was the best thing ever happened to me, because when you go to 14 different schools, your education's all over the place. You know, you'd be at one school and you know, they'd be diagrammed in a sentence, you get to the next one and they'd already done it. And I mean, it plays havoc on your academics. And my senior year in high school, I took the SAT test the night of our quarterfinals of the state championship. I'd gotten home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I took it the next day, barely scored 1,000 on it. I mean, barely. Fortunately, I'd made the all-state team in North Carolina that year playing soccer, and I had several scholarship offers, but High Point offered me the most money. But I came to High Point, and it was a smaller school. I've always believed in smaller schools. I really wanted to learn, and the teachers there were the kind of folks that if you wanted to learn, they'd teach you. And I loved school. You know, I had grown up struggling to read. Any of y'all ever had that problem as a kid? I mean, it's hard. You know, I was one of those kids that would freak out on like spelling bee day, and of course we'd have vocabulary tests, and I could study for 2 hours to get a 70, and that was like a success. But you grew up in that era, no one knew about ADD, no one learned about learning disability, so you had to kind of figure it out on your own. But I had 2 parents. My dad was a colonel in the Marines. My mom was a blue-collar kid from New England. They were both from really tough backgrounds. I used to tease my dad. He's the only guy I ever met that joined the Marines, and life got easier. And that, any of y'all been in the service here? Yeah, I mean, I know you have. Boot camp's no fun, and for Dad, it was actually a step up from where he'd been. But those 2 wouldn't put on me. You know, my dad used to give me books, and if I wrote him a book report and told him about it, I get to keep the book, and I still have those books in my office. So, you know, they would not give up, and by 4th grade, I finally was reading. And like my buddy Greg, who learned to read later in life, when I learned how to read, I was so excited to read that I just never quit reading. And I've read a book a week since junior high. And You know, my dad, being a sweet Marine colonel, took me aside when I was like in middle school, and he said, son, you're not the sharpest tool in the shed. He goes, but these are the 5 things you're good at. You know, you're good with people, you're a good writer, you know, you're good in front of folks, you're a good athlete. And so he told me to focus on those things that I did well, and find people and surround yourself with folks that can do the things you don't do well. And so I got to High Point, and you know, 1,000 on your SAT is not great. By the time I graduated, your SAT score is supposed to correlate with LSAT and GRE tests. Those are the tests you take for law school and grad school. And I pretty much doubled my score. I got into 4 grad schools, got into 3 law schools. Thank God I didn't go to law school, because the Lord's got enough lawyers in this town already. But I tell you, that school changed my life. And I knew from early on from my dad, I wasn't the smartest guy in the school, but I could outwork anybody. And I've learned through life that if you work hard, you can outwork people. And that's exactly what I did academically. It's exactly what I did in terms of sports. The irony of what's happened in my life was, I'm this kid who was having a hard time reading to 4th grade. I ended up getting a double degree in English and history as a college student. I got a master's, a Master of Fine Arts in Communications, and then I ended up at Harvard for postgraduate school. And I'll never forget the day I found out it was a competitive program. I found out I got in it. I was all excited, called my mom up. You know, I'm telling her about how I got in, and she's just gushing. You know how moms are. They're just telling you how wonderful you are. And I hear my dad in the background, and he's sitting in his Barca Lounger, and he goes, Dottie, tell that boy the only way I thought he'd get close to Harvard was delivering pizza. And that was the Colonel. But tonight, let me talk to you about how Greg and I met. Coaching for 23 years. In 2000, I had a kid that I just loved. This guy was a 2nd generation Liberian. His name was Lumius Horace, and his father, who confusingly enough, was also named Lumius, so we called him Big Lumius, and the son was Little Lumius. And he and I met playing semi-pro ball. He was a phenomenal player. He played professionally in Liberia, played on the national team for a little bit. And he and I had played a couple times together. We liked each other, so we started coaching together. And my kid was on the team, his kid was on the team. We were really close. He lived in a rough neighborhood, so that Little Lumius would stay at our house on the weekends. And for 3 years we coached together, and then one night Big Lumius came to me and he said, Paul, you know, I'm having a really hard time. He had a really thick accent, and he was an accountant by training. He was a very bright guy. And he said, it's just not working with my wife, and we're getting divorced. And my first thought was, well, you got to take Little Lumius with you wherever you go. And he couldn't do it. And I said, you know, this is a mistake. I said, I love your wife, but she's not a disciplinarian. She's an enabler. You know, and this kid, he's a bright kid, but Greg, how do you describe Little Lumius? He knew how to get in trouble. But anyways, super bright kid, handsome kid, charismatic, probably a Division I quality soccer player at 13 years old. I used to tell him all the time, if you keep your nose clean, every door is going to get open for you. Well, Dad left, the next year happened, and he just started going downhill. He got in trouble at school. Next thing I know, he's stealing stuff from school. We got him out of that. He's get some fights in the neighborhood. Now he's in stolen cars in the neighborhood. I mean, it just went from bad to worse. And one night, I kept bailing him out, and that was the mistake I made. And one night I came back from a weekend away, and his mother was on my doorstep crying. And when I went up to her, her accent was super thick, and I could barely understand her. All I could hear was, "You've been arrested." And I've always had a pretty close relationship with the police department, so I went down to see the magistrate. And when I got there, I said, "Okay, you know, how much trouble is he in?" And this guy shook his head, and he said, "He's in serious trouble. He's looking at like 60 years in prison." And it turned out, and this is what a lot of kids in this town were doing at the time, and I don't know if they're doing it again. I hope they're not, because I think, Greg, you're telling me the gang situation's gotten better, right? Especially with the young guys. But in the early 2000s, all these young kids were jumping into these gangs, and what they would do is they would start these little gangbang wannabe clubs. You know, they weren't officially affiliated, but these real gangbangers were using them to do things that if they'd gotten caught, because they had a record, they'd gone to jail. And they knew if these kids got caught, they'd get off fairly easily. Well, that night, it seems that Loomis and three of his buddies were driving down Green Street, and they passed a car that was coming the opposite direction, and it was another gang that they didn't get along with. And so the guy who was driving pulls a revolver out of his pocket, and he fired a couple rounds over the car, not at him, but over him to scare him. Being the criminal geniuses that these kids were, they didn't realize they were being followed by a marked police car. And so they're looking at a drive-by, they're looking at a crime with a gun involved. We get a gun involved in the crime, it becomes a federal offense. And they were in a lot of trouble. And, I went the next morning, this guy named Jim Morgan, who Greg knows, he's a guy who was the founding chairman of the community foundation that I run now. He's a lawyer, and I always told Jim if I ever killed someone by accident, he was going to be my first phone call, because this guy is a great lawyer. And so we went to work, we went to see the DA, and we negotiated with the guy for 2 weeks, to figure out a way to get Loomis out of trouble, out of jail, and keep him in school. And we finally figured out a deal where if I raised 10 grand, we could send him to a camp in Georgia, in Prayer Mountain. And if he went through that camp for a year and he graduated, all his felonies would be erased. I mean, it was like the best deal in town. Jim and I went to the jail. I had talked his mother into keeping Loomis in jail for 2 weeks while we were trying to figure this out. He'd never had to suffer the consequences of what he'd done before. And we got in there, and I walked him through what we were going to do, and he looked at me and he said, "I can't do it, I'm not going, I'm staying here." And I was like, Loomis, I said, "You're making a life-altering decision here." I said, "This guy's giving you an option to save your life. You can still play college ball, you can do anything you want," because he was a really bright kid. But he wouldn't do it. And I remember that night I walked out with Jim, and you ever been so mad you're shaking and almost in tears? And I was both. I mean, I was just so upset with that kid. And Jim put his arm around me and he said, "Paul, sometimes you just got to let somebody go until they're ready to make the decision." And I'll be honest with you, that's a really hard thing for me to do. I'm a loyal person. Victor will tell you, man, you won't meet more loyal people than Marines, man. We do anything for brother. And so he went to jail, and his story is just this really sad story. I mean, he's been there 3 times now. He's got 2 illegitimate kids. I saw him about 2 years ago. Big jailhouse body, tats all over him, 2 illegitimate kids, doesn't have a job, hadn't had a job. And this was a kid who could have easily gone to college, graduate school. I mean, he could have done anything he wanted to do. Just broke my heart. I mean, I was devastated for a good 2 years. I had started this group called the Lighthouse Project 26 years ago. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but I've received the Carnegie Hero Medal, and when you get the Carnegie Hero Medal, you get money with it. And I've used that money to fund the Lighthouse Project, and I've been bringing in speakers from all over the country for 26 years. And I'd had everybody from Coach Boone, you remember the Titans? Well, we had the real Coach Boone come to High Point one year. He's the coolest guy you'll ever meet. Not as good looking as Danzel, but really, really cool guy. We had, you guys ever seen the movie Patch Adams?
Yeah.
We had the real Patch Adams come in here, and that dude was seriously the weirdest dude I've ever met. I mean, he had like 6 different color hair, but he was so good with the kids. We had James Bradley, who wrote Flags of Our Fathers. We had, Sean Alexander. Any of you guys football fans? You remember Sean? He played for, yeah, and I think he ended with Redskins. He came, and man, I've never seen a guy so ripped in my life. When we bring these speakers in, and Greg has been part of this over the years, we would speak in all the schools, so we would be with them the whole day, and we'd done like 4 schools, and Sean had been, just really outstanding in the schools. And I'd invited a friend of mine who was a former Duke All-American football player, and I knew he'd just love hanging around with this guy. So he's like hanging around with Sean, being a fanboy all day. It was hilarious. Dwight Bumgarner, I don't know if any of y'all remember him. He was a great guy, but he was the original, old curmudgeon. And at one point, I took a picture of the two of them, and Dwight had his arm around him, and he was just loving on Sean. And unbeknownst to me, a couple weeks later, my ladies at work photoshopped my head onto Sean Alexander's body and gave it. I got to give it to Dwight. I still have it in my office. He sent it back with a Sharpie that says you're sick. But that day, Sean had a dress shirt on, but he was getting ready to go into the country club for lunch, and they wanted to put a Veritas shirt on. So he took that shirt off, and honestly, I've never seen anyone so ripped in my life. And I don't think he did real well at DC with the Redskins, did he? He was kind of hurt at that point, I think, but a wonderful guy. But we've had all these amazing speakers over the years, and we had Giselle Abramson, who survived Auschwitz, who came in and talked to the kids about, accepting each other's differences. But I figured, with all the stuff that was going on with the kids, and with Lumius just crashing and burning, I thought, I'm going to bring in some people that work with kids around the country, and how do they do it, and how do you do it right? So we brought in Clifton Talbert, who wrote a book called Once Upon a Time We Were Colored. Have any of y'all ever read it? If you haven't, you need to. It's a memoir of growing up in Mississippi during the segregation years. And this guy's become a national figure for mentoring young black men. And then I brought in, what was his name? He was a MacArthur Genius Grant awardee who worked with kids in Washington, Boston, and New York. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Genius Award, MacArthur Genius Award. Like, you can't apply for it. These guys that run the organization, they pick people that are doing amazing things, and he was one of those guys. And Robert Woodson was his name, and he came in and just blew the place away. And then the third guy we brought in was Greg, who's fellow that ran for president, African-American fellow. He was in, remember you got a picture of with him. It's sitting up in my office. Ben Bradley, Ben Carson. Okay, y'all heard of Ben Carson. We brought him in. And what we would do when they came in is they'd do a bunch of schools, but then I got some leaders in the black community, and I paid for the breakfast, and I paid for the speaker, but they were in charge of setting up the breakfast, and we did it over at the Macedonia Resource Center, so everybody got to hear, how do we take care of these young black men? And I think it made a difference, but what it did for me is it taught me that I wasn't the guy to lead the charge. I needed someone who looked like these guys. I needed someone who had been through their experiences, made some of the same mistakes they'd made, and lived to tell about it. And so I started praying for this guy, and I prayed for him for 2 years. And a lot of the black clergy in town thought they thought I was this crazy white guy praying for the black noses, is what they kept teasing me about. And but I faithfully pray for this guy every night. And honest to God, 2 years almost to the date, I get a call from a guy named Hank Wall. Do y'all remember Hank Wall? Bonzo, he's one of the finest men I ever known. I spoke at his funeral, just thought the world of him. Well, he calls me up, and I'm in my office, and it was a Wednesday. I'll never forget this. He calls up and he goes, "Paul, I found your Moses." I said, "Seriously?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "This is your guy." And I said, "Well, tell me about him." He goes, "Well, he's about 6'3". Back then, he went about 290. Is that about right? 290, 280? Yeah, he was a big boy. And he said he had his eye knocked out with a baseball bat in a gang fight. And oh, by the way, he's been in federal prison for 18 years. And man, I'm sitting in my office going, "Oh my God, you got to be careful what you pray for." But I said, "Hey, I got something going on tomorrow," which would have been Thursday, but I can meet you guys on Friday. And so Greg's heard this, I thought, man, I need to take this guy where there's a lot of people and cops. So I took him to the doghouse. There's always cops in the doghouse. And I was there early that day, and I was sitting at the table, and Greg walked in with Hank. And guys, I'm not exaggerating. I saw Greg walk in, and I felt God's hand on this guy's shoulders. I just knew there was something about this guy. We sat down. We talked for I think it took me 5 minutes, and I said, "Greg, I want to work with you." And I mean, he was a pretty scary dude back then, And I said, "I want you to come to my office tomorrow, alone, and we're going to come up with a 30-minute talk. And we worked on the talk, and then for the next 3 years, through the Lighthouse Project, we took Greg into every middle school and every high school in Guilford County. And he told his story. And what I love about Greg's story is it's kind of an in-your-face. You know, he's made mistakes, and what I admire most about Greg is he admits them, he learned from them, and he moved on. And you couldn't find a better guy to reach out to these kids, because these kids couldn't get away with anything with him because he tried everything they were going to try already. And Greg has a heart as big as High Point. And so for 3 years, we were doing this, and you know, I told Greg early on, man, I'm getting a lot of heat for helping you here, because you know, I'm the head of this. You know, we're what, $130 million foundation. I'm working with all the, you know, big leaders in the community, and man, people are going, who in the heck are you helping? And one night I was at, you know where Smitty's is on the corner of, was it Westchester and Lexington? I'm standing there talking to somebody, and somebody drives right up, and I feel him against the back of my legs. And a horn went off, and I turned around, and it was Chief Faley. You guys remember Chief Faley when he was our police chief? Big dude, and Air Force vet. And he and I were really close friends, and man, he took me to the side of Smitty's up against the wall. He said, oh, do you have any idea who you're helping? You know what wants you, this guy? You know what he did? You know what he did? I said, Chief, I don't want to know what he did. I said, Greg is a changed man in Christ as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to hear it. And man, he wouldn't let go. And I finally said, Chief, you're in the Air Force. I've been in the Marines. I said, if anybody needs forgiveness, it's us. And he goes, well, you got a point there. And I said, take your best detectives and you watch him. And you watch him close. And the minute he does one thing wrong, I'll end the relationship that night. And I went back and told Greg that day. And what he had to do was probably one of the hardest things I've ever seen. Is he came back, he had all these relationships in town, but they were all, most of them were somehow involved with the drug trade and the gang world. And so I said, you gotta end all those relationships. So imagine coming back to your hometown and not being able to talk to anybody. I mean, and Greg did that. We used to have lunch at least once a week at Sanella's, and I was doing it to make sure he was eating and to make sure he was staying out of trouble. And then as I got a little older, my son, my boy was junior high back then, and he was a pain in the ass back then. I mean, he was a little troublemaker. And so I started bringing Jordy to lunch with Greg, and they got to be really good buddies. And I wanted him to see, you know, another side of the world. And Greg, you and him are like brothers now. And so 3 years go by. I'm sitting there one day at Sanella's, and I said, Greg, you're smarter than half my soccer team was in college. And somehow those guys managed to graduate. I said, you need to go to college. Of course, Greg, he's eating on some lamb. And he looks at me like I'm nuts, and he goes, I think you've been smoking what I used to sell. And I said, I have not. And I said, there's a college in town. It was called John Wesley. It's since merged with another one in Winston-Salem, and it's a bigger college now. But I said, that president owes me like 20 favors, and I'm going to go cash him in. I'm going to get you one semester, and we'll pay for it. All you got to do is get the grades. And then I said, Greg, you're going to go in and you can do it yourself. So he went in and did the whole thing himself, and he called me later that day. He goes, Paul, I'm in college. I said, man, I knew he could do it. My wife and I, and we got him a little briefcase with his name on it. Remember that? And felt like I sent my third kid to college. And it was so funny. He calls me and he goes, "But I got a problem, Paul." He said, "I got to get a physical." And it was like a Thursday, and school started on a Monday. And he said, "Community clinic can't see me for a month, and I don't have any money, and I don't know any doctors." And I said, "Well, give me a few minutes. I'll make some calls." So I called a couple of my buddies that were doctors, and one of them was the father of my son's best friend, Richard Kirsch. And I said, "Richard, I know this isn't exactly your expertise, but I got a guy that just needs physical. Would you be willing to do it?" And I told him a little bit about Greg. And Richard Kirsch is one of the finest men I think I've ever known, just a godly guy. He said, "Yeah, send him over 9 o'clock tomorrow morning at such and such address." And so I called Greg up and I said, "Greg, I got you a doctor. You got to be at such and such address at 9 o'clock. And And by the way, this guy's a gynecologist. Does that bother you? And Greg was like, no big deal. No big deal. Well, he didn't know what a gynecologist was. He walks into that office the next morning and was scared the living daylights out of like 20 women. But just to show you how God is in situations like this, he got his physical, and remember, he found out you had like stroke level blood pressure. You know, you'd been in prison, you'd been eating bad food, you'd been in a stressful environment, and so Richard would not let him leave the office until the community clinic guaranteed they give him meds that day, and I believe it saved your life, because your brother died of a stroke, your mom died of a stroke. I think you were probably heading that way. God had his hand on this guy from the beginning. And so so he starts college, and first day he walks in, and you know how in every school there's some lady that kind of runs everything. He goes up to her and he introduces himself, and sees a picture of her husband and her, and he goes, "I think I know your husband." She goes, "Oh yes, he's a sergeant in the police department, there's this and that." Greg goes, "Well, we know each other." He goes, "Tell me you met Greg Commander today." And so he comes back the next day and he goes, "Well, what did your husband say?" And she goes, "He told me to run as fast as I could in the other direction." But Greg went to work. You have what, a 3.4 GPA first semester. 4 years later, he had 2 degrees, one in theology and one in counseling. And he was the first person in his family to have a college degree. And not only did he get 2 degrees, he also was chosen as the Laurel Wreath. It was the leadership award. It was for the student at that university that had showed the most leadership in their entire class, and it was voted by his classmates. And I was on vacation when he was graduating, and I told my wife, I said, "Man, I'm at the beach, and I'm like, I can't not be there for Greg." And she's not happy that I'm leaving, but I got up, drove out there, and I got there just before the dinner was being served, and so we're sitting there, and Greg and I are yucking it up, and people are coming up for the awards, and we hear something about this Laurel Wreath Award. The next thing we know, we hear Greg Commander's name called. And Greg, that was one of the proudest moments of my life, because God had his hand on Greg. And I can tell you right now, he's got his hand on every one of you guys too. And, life's not fair. And I learned that a long time ago. And life is going to throw you curveballs. And if you don't have a higher power in your life, if you don't have God in your life, I'm telling you, you're not going to make it. And Greg and I have been friends for 16 years now. And I've seen him do more good in this town than any other person I've ever met. And I would say he is one of the men that has impacted my life more than anybody. And it was really funny, when he went to college, my son was going to college. And he and Jordan would compete for grades. Greg was getting good grades. Now Jordy went to college to play soccer like I did. And he was a pretty good soccer player, but his junior year, end of his junior year, he blew his knee out. It was a pretty serious injury. He was playing with the national program back then. And, they got us into the Stedman Clinic in Colorado, and he had this real uptown surgery, and it looked like they'd fixed it. And this is a kid that could play the MLS for at least 3 or 4 years. He's a really good player. So we think he's healed. We're all excited because it was kind of touch and go for a while there. He comes back in the spring season, does real well. That summer he went to Brazil and played down there. And while he was in Brazil, he did something to his knee. And he came back that senior year. And he trained a day and his knee would swell up, get better. Take 2 days off, he'd play again and his knee would swell up. And it's happened 2 or 3 times, and I finally got on the plane and flew up there and told him, "Listen, it's just not worth it. It's not worth ruining your knee over." And I said, "Maybe it just needs time." I said, "Let's take this year off. Let's not play soccer this year. You've shown what player you are. You can get tryouts, pro tryouts if you want, if the knee gets better." And I said, "Let's just be a student, like do all the things you've never done before, like study and, do an internship and all this stuff." So he did. And So he comes back and he had a 3.6 GPA the first semester of his senior year. And I'm like shocked, because that's like the clouds parting and Jesus coming down. I mean, because Jordy, he's a lot like me. All I want to do is play soccer, be in the rain. That's all I want to do as a kid. And so, so we're at lunch that day, and you know, we're meeting with Greg, and I said, Jordy, Greg's got a 3.6 GPA. I mean, how cool? Or no, Jordy has a 3.6 GPA. What do you think of that? And Greg's eating his lamb, and he's going, yeah. He goes, that's not bad, little brother, but I did better. And I was like, whoa, really? And he goes, yeah. And he's giving Jordan a hard time for a few minutes, and I finally go, well, what's your GPA? And he goes, Jordan, read it, weep, man. I got a 3.17. But let me tell you, Greg's got 2 degrees, and now the next thing I'm going to make him do is go to graduate school. So everything that I've seen him do has just been an acknowledgement that God had plans for this guy. And you know, Greg, a lot of people were not excited about you in the end. And I've seen you turn all of those guys around. And I couldn't be more proud of you. So, yeah. So this is, you know, if this is part of what you've done, I'd say you're onto a really good thing, and I believe this is just starting. A little bit about me. You know, I told you I grew up in the military. Came to school, played ball, had a great experience playing ball. Got to play pro ball a couple of years. But my goal from like 5 years old was to be a Marine officer. And it's all I ever wanted to be. In fact, as a kid, I thought college was just a pit stop on your way to get a commission. You know, I didn't realize like college is like Carolina Tar Heels. I mean, when you're growing up overseas, you never hear any of this stuff. The only soccer I really watched was Manchester United, you know, the real stuff in England. And so, you know, my dad really wanted me to go to the Naval Academy. Of course, you know, I'm this guy that scored 1,000 on my, about 1,000 on my SAT, and you know, my grades are okay, but not great. And I mean, you got to be like an engineer to go to the Naval Academy. So my dad was real unhappy about that. And so I go to college. I went to High Point. I played my first year. I started right away. Had a great season. Never forget, my dad came at Christmas time. He goes, I'm called Joey in my house because he's Paul as well, but he's the senior Paul, so we get to call him. Well, we've always called him the Colonel. They should have called me Paul. He said, good news. He said, the Naval Academy's been watching you. They see you got good grades, and they see how good you are in soccer. They're going to give you a shot next year. And I was like, well, you know, Colonel, I really like High Point College, and kind of like being like in school with girls and not having a skinhead. And so anyway, he's pretty upset with me about that. So I came back from Christmas break and joined the Marines. Joined the day I turned 18. And we did my first training that summer. And boy, I mean, how do you explain boot camp, man? I mean, even growing up with a Marine Colonel, it was a wake-up call. And but what happened was I played that summer. You know, it was 10 weeks long that summer, the OCS program I was in. And so I had 10 weeks away from soccer. I show up that my sophomore year on a soccer scholarship. And man, I sucked. I didn't have my touch anymore. It took me like 3 months to get my touch back. And it was awful. One of the worst seasons I've been through. I mean, never sat on the bench in my life. I mean, that was one of the hardest things I ever went through. And part of it was just the humiliation, not being on the field. But the other part was, you know, I knew I was capable of doing it. And it was a tough year. And the only thing that kept me going was Jesus. I mean, he was the only thing that kept my head up. But what I did is I played semi-pro ball the next year, had a really good year, came back, and then I started for 2 years and was captain of the team, had a great experience. I mean, that was the only thing that had ever gone wrong in my life, that one semester. So I'm going back to Quantico Marine Base that summer. I'm going to finish up and get my commission. I have you know, the second half of PLC to go through. And my junior year, I had gone up for header in a district championship game, and I guy cut me under when I was up in the air. And I did a 1.5 and came down and caught my fall with my hand and it snapped my forearm in half. I had double compound fracture. You ever seen one of those, like the bones are sticking out and it was gruesome? It's the only time I've ever seen a referee almost faint. And I'll never forget, I'm laying there and I'm thinking, I knew this guy had cheap shot at me and I was getting ready to get up and get him. And I remember I got up and my hand stayed down there, but the other one came up. And you could just see everybody on the field getting ready to hurl. And I'm sitting there and my coaches come up and, the first coach looks at me and goes, oh shit. And the other coach looks at me and looks at him and goes, who are we going to put in for Paul? And so I end up in the hospital. I end up in High Point Hospital. I got this old dude, Dr. Schaefer, who tried to set it 3 times without surgery. And I was still wearing my cleats and I'm on the examination room. And I was arched up. I looked like Linda Blair in The Exorcist, man. I mean, I've never been in so much pain in my life. And, they finally decided they're going to do surgery. So they did the surgery that next day. And they put a metal plate and 3 screws in it because it was just a mess. And, I rehabbed and I played with a cast for 8 months that year, played indoor soccer in spring season with it. And I had to go in for a physical down at the AFES building, I guess it was in Charlotte back then. And all of a sudden I get this call from the range saying, hey, you're going to be a year away from the OCS and we just realized you have a plate, 3 screws in your arm and you can't go to OCS with that. I was like, what genius came up with that idea? I said, I just had the surgery. I went to my civilian doctors and they were like, this is a really bad idea to get this done. But, I was that kid at 5 years old marching up and down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning singing the Marine Corps hymn when I was saying goodbye to my dad, driving the neighbors nuts. And, I remember telling the civilian doctor, I said, man, if they told me to cut my arm off, I'd do it. And I said, I've been wanting to do this since I was 5 years old. So I had the surgery, rehabbed again. I had to take the PFT again, physical training, physical fitness test. And I maxed 24 pull-ups, sit-ups, 3-mile run. I mean, I was ready to go. And so I go to Quantico. I'm 4 weeks into the program. I'm going over the O course one morning. We would PT at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And any of y'all been to Virginia in the summertime? The morning, everything's wet, And so we're going over the obstacle course. There was this one obstacle that it was like 2 wooden posts with 2 bars. And you jump up and you throw yourself over it. And I lost my grip. And when I went to grab it, I hit my arm on the bar. And I knew it was broken the second I hit it. And, I'm thinking, I've only got a few more weeks to go. I said, if I don't tell anybody, I might get away with this. And so I was taking 20 aspirin a day. I mean, I'm amazed I don't have a bleeding ulcer. I had to do a PFT. We had a physical fitness test right toward the end. And when I took it, I went from doing 24 pull-ups to 8 because I'm basically doing it with my right arm. And my drill instructor thought I was screwing around, so he grabs my left arm. And I blacked out and went down like a bag of bricks at his feet. Next thing I know, I wake up, I'm in sick bay, and I had never seen the Marine Corps move as fast as this in my life. I was out of the Marines in 48 hours. I mean, I was medically disqualified. And guys, it may not sound like a lot to you, but that was the end of my world. I mean, I had never, ever failed at something as badly as I failed at this. Broke my heart. I had to call my dad and tell him this dream we had for 20 years was done. And he cried on the phone. And I don't know if you've met my dad, Craig, but he had ribbons from year to year. He's a 3-war Marine. He was a Mustang. He went as a PFC, worked his way all the way up to Colonel. This guy was hardcore. Never seen him cry before. We were so torn up, we didn't even talk to each other for a year. I mean, it was just too painful. And, all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be my life plan. What do I do now? And I was mad at God. I was like, God, I worked hard to get here. How could you do this to me? And, being a 20-year-old idiot, I dated this girl in college and we got married. So I'm married, I'm coaching and teaching, and I'm working, I know I want to go to grad school. So I'm doing a couple other jobs on the side. I'm not spending enough time with it. One day I come home and this we lived in this condo place that was off Johnson Street in Eastchester. There was this old guy I used to play tennis with out there, and he comes up to me one afternoon and he goes, Paul, take a walk with me. And I said, okay. And walking with him, he's got his arm in my arm, and he goes, there's no easy way to tell you this. Your wife has a gentleman caller in the afternoon. And I went, what? He goes, your wife's got a boyfriend, and he's showing up in the afternoon. And so, you know, I bonked out of the Marines. I got a wife who's cheating on me. We end up getting divorced. I mean, my whole world fell apart, you know, and you got to go, God, what is going on here? You know, I had accepted Christ. I had, you know, I was a good guy, didn't get in trouble, tried to do the right thing. And I went to my father-in-law at the time, and I told him what was happening, and I said, listen, I don't want anything, but I don't want credit cards following me to Greensboro. So I'm just going to go to graduate school full-time, and you won't see me again. And I got over to Greensboro and realized I was homeless. I didn't have a place to stay. We had a condo, and I'd given it to her basically. And so for 3 years, man, I was eating peanut butter and jelly and working 3 jobs and living in a it was like the poor white trash part of Spring Garden Road. And I mean, working hard. And I met a guy named John Willett. Started going to his church. Started going to a Bible study with him. And of course I was going to school as well, and I really enjoyed what I was studying. And it took 2 or 3 years, but all of a sudden my life turned around. And it just made me realize that life is a lot like scoring goals in a soccer game, okay? Scoring goals in a soccer game is more about failure than it is success. Because you can take 23 shots and 1 will go in. And life can be that way. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. And I will never forget, I mean, this house we were living in, man, it was so bad we padlocked the front door. And had this really raunchy bathroom. And I remember one night I'd come in from working really late, and I was kneeling beside the toilet and praying, God, I believe you're there, but I got to get a sign. And that was the night I really feel like God just touched me on the shoulder, and I got on track. And about a year later, I met a great girl, dated her for 5 years, and then got remarried, had 2 kids, became a writer and producer for 14 years, traveled all over the world, writing, producing programs for TV and film. I mean, I couldn't have been happier. I mean, everything I'd hoped for came true after everything had fallen apart. And when I was 38 years old, I'm working with Furniture Day magazine, and we were very involved with the furniture market. And so I was going to be working the furniture market. And my wife and my 2 kids were going to go to the beach with my in-laws. And how am I doing on time? A few more minutes? Oh, I'm not boring anybody? Okay. So my wife and my in-laws are going to the beach, and I'm in Winston-Salem, staying at my in-laws' house. Somebody's rented our house on the lake, and it's a Friday morning, and I'm supposed to play squash at 6 o'clock in the morning with my old boss, who was a Harvard MBA, who hated people to be late. So I was really freaking out about not being on time. So I got up at 4:30. I got dressed, put on, like, I don't know if you know what squash is. It's kind of like racquetball, but it's a smaller racket, and so I think more like chess as opposed to racquetball being checkers, you know. And so I'm dressed like I'm playing tennis. I got my suit and all this stuff. I put it in the car. But when I open the garage door, I can see it's like torrential rain. I mean, it's coming down so hard, windshield wipers practically don't work. So I get in the car, and I'm driving. You all remember Old 311 before they did their, remember, I mean, it's a treacherous road even when it was nice. And so I'm driving that road, and I'm trying to go as fast as I can, but I'm not going very fast. And by the time I hit Main Street, I realized I was going to be late for this Harvard MBA boss I had, who I really respected and didn't want to let down. And so I remembered there was a shortcut from Main Street to Johnson Street if you went to Shady Brook. Okay, you know where Shady Brook is, where the elementary school is? Okay, so it's like 5 o'clock at this point, still dark, still raining like crazy. So I go flying up Shady Brook, slight incline, and I went down into a hollow. And I got almost to the bottom of the hill and literally stopped 2 feet from driving into a flash flood. There was like 5 feet of water on this road. It was crazy. And, stopped the car really quick. Of course, it's dark, it's stormy. Windshield wipers weren't doing great, but I thought I saw something in my front window. And I was about to pull away because I figured I'm really going to be late now. But something made me stop, and I got out of the car and I looked out. And what I had seen was a white T-shirt. There was a guy on top of a Oldsmobile station wagon. And this road had been just covered with the flash flood. And there was a creek beside it that normally was just like three feet of water. That morning it was 25 feet deep. It was crazy. It was when they were building the overpass for the new 311, so all the trees had been cut down. So the water, nothing could stop the water. So, it was like a class 3 rapids. So, it was crazy. And so I see this guy on top of this car, and the car's sinking nose down. And grew up in the Philippines, had a sweet Marine colonel for a father who basically grabbed me by the nape of the neck and threw me in the pool when I was 2 and told me to swim. So everybody in my family is good swimmers. And I went to the edge of the water and I said, "Hey, I'm a good swimmer, I'll come get you." And the guy said, "I'm okay, there's a woman trapped in the car, I can't get her out." And this guy was from New York, and he had come from his furniture market and rented this house that was up on the hill. And he'd gotten up early to go running, and it was raining so bad that morning. I think what he was trying to decide is, how bad do I really want to run, because it was raining that bad. And so he's looking at the rain, and all of a sudden he sees this woman come from the opposite direction I came from and not see the water in time and slid right into the water. And what happened was the car went waterborne really quickly. And, Jack, his name was Jack Cavanaugh, he comes running down from the house. And by the time he gets to the car, it's like up to his chest in water. And this woman's name was Ella Mayborn. She was a Swedish slave and was 70 years old. She was on her way to the first shift at a hosiery mill. And Jack said she was still literally trying to drive while her car was floating in the water. And he was trying to open the door, trying to do the windows, but it was electric locks and windows. The car had shorted. And so he can't get her out, and this car keeps going deeper and deeper. And pretty soon he's up to his chest. And then he finally called on top of the car, and that's when they showed up. So he's yelling to me, and he goes, "Call 911." Of course, this is 1993. Okay, nobody had cell phones back then. If you had a cell phone, it was like that big. And, I'm standing there and I'm thinking, 911's not going to make this one in time. And so, you remember when they waterproofed us in the Marines, they tell you to take your clothes off. So, being the genius I was back then, I stripped everything off but a pair of compression shorts. Remember, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I sprint for the nearest house. And thank God I sprinted to the house that Jack Cavanaugh was staying in. His entire staff were women, so I'm pounding on the door trying to wake people up. And they open the door, and there's this guy, head and shaved, and comes upstairs practically naked. And I'm like, I need something to break a window. Well, that night, one of the ladies had shown up late and couldn't sleep. She walked the house, and she knew there was a tool room right downstairs. And so they knew exactly where to point me. I go running down to the room, open the door, turn on the light. You guys are old enough to remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You remember when they opened the tabernacle and the light shines out? Well, that's what this room looked like. It must have had 10,000 tools in it. And in my house, I'm the guy that you keep tools away from. I had no idea what I should get. I'd never tried to break a car window on purpose. So I grabbed a hammer, and I thought, man, I might need something heavier. So I grabbed a plumber's wrench that was like that big heavy wrench. And told the girls to call 911, and I go running down the hill. It was about 300 meters from the car. And I'm running like crazy, and I look down, and this car has sunk all the way to literally the back bumper. Jack somehow had talked Ella May out of the front seat, into the middle seat, and into the back seat. But the car had filled up with water on the inside, and Jack had had to stand there and watch her die. She drowned right in front of him. By the time, it took me 3 tries to get to the car because I'm swimming with my hammer and this plumber's wrench, and some plumber's wrench ground me twice. When I got there, I was so exhausted. I handed him the wrench, and he put it right on top of, remember the old cars, they used to have those racks on the top?
Yeah.
Put it right behind that rack. 3 hours later, when they dredged the car had been dragged 5 feet underwater. That plumber's wrench was still exactly, it was that heavy. But anyway, he pulled me up. I looked in and I saw her. I mean, she was just. I mean, she looked like she was dead. First time, my first thought was, gosh, she looks just like my mother. And so I told Jack to cover his eyes. I hit it with the hammer. The window was safety glass, so it shatters. It doesn't like break into shards. And because it was full inside, when I hit the window, the car just went straight down. So I jump in and I grab poor Ella May, 70-year-old lady, by her crotch. He's got her by her arm. Now I should tell you, I'm married to a psychologist, and it took me 10 years of therapy to get over grabbing her by her crotch. But we were pulling her out, and we went down a good 20 feet before we finally got her out. Have you ever tried to handle someone who's unconscious in the water? Dead weight. I mean, it's really, really difficult. So we're tugging and pulling, and Jack and we talked afterwards, and I said, you know, Jack, I'd already decided I wasn't going to let her go, because I knew if we let her go, we'd never see her again. The water was real murky and muddy and dark. And so we finally pull her out. We both get through. You know, I get cut a little bit on my hands when we do it. And we pop up, and now we're spinning in this current, and we're going toward this culvert that's going to take us under the road and into the lake. And they would have found us 2 weeks later. And Jack saves the day because he reaches out and grabs a branch, which allows me to let go of her crotch and get her arm. And then we swam her in. And as we were swimming her in, Jack was this pretty studly New York tough guy. And poor Ella May, I think he Heimlich maneuvered by accident. He elbowed her. And all of a sudden, she's like retching up this stuff you would not believe a human being could swallow. I mean, sticks, mud, and I was ready for a fish to come out. And she's screaming at the top of her lungs, help me, Jesus, help me, Jesus. And Jack's, like I said, a tough guy, and he goes, all right, lady, Jesus is helping you. And she looks at me and she goes, I think I'm having a heart attack. And guys, I'll be honest with you, at that point I'm thinking, life's pretty good, you know. When I'm holding on to Ella May's crotch and we're 20 feet underwater, and I'm thinking, man, I may not make it out of this, and somebody's got to tell my wife I died saving someone I don't even know. And so I'm thinking life's pretty good, and she tells me she had a heart attack, so we got her on our shoulders, we humped her up to the house. I got her on the deck in the kitchen, and I could still see the linoleum. It was this really nasty linoleum pattern. I had her laid out, I was straddling the 75-year-old lady. I'm pulling stuff out of her mouth, and I'm doing CPR on her. And have you all ever done CPR on somebody? It's exhausting. And so I'm at it for about 5 minutes, and I've got her breathing, but barely. And we're still pulling stuff out of her mouth, and she's not looking good. And I finally looked over to my left, and I saw these 2 combat boots step up, okay? And they're bloused like a military guy. And I look up, and it's a High Point police officer. And it was Ken Schultz.
Oh, wow.
And it was Ken Schultz that eventually became the police chief. And it was his 2nd year as a canine officer. And I remember I looked up at him and I said, dude, do you know anything about first aid? I'm running out of ideas here. If it had been a sucking chest wound, I was going to be the man. I could have taken care of that. But this CPR stuff, I mean, it's just hard. And I said, do you know anything about first aid? And he goes, yeah, I used to be a Green Beret medic. I was like, dude, I said, I was a Marine, man. I've never been so happy to see an Army doggy in my life. I said, get out here and help me. And so we worked on her together. And about 3 minutes later, the EMT guys showed up. They went to work on her. They intubated her. Have you ever seen that where they stick the hose down? I mean, I can't believe how much water that lady swallowed. But they finally turned around and they said, guys, you can relax. She didn't have a heart attack. She had so much pressure from all that water. And she's going to feel a lot better now. And they had her on a gurney, and they're getting ready to take her out the door. And Jack and I are standing there, and I'm in my little white shorts covered in blood. Whole body's covered in blood. Jack's covered in blood. And we finally found out that I had a cut that was maybe 1/4 of an inch long that just bled like crazy all over us. So they wipe us down, and we're getting ready to walk out of the house, and I suddenly realized I got this Harvard MBA at the squash court waiting for me. So I go to the phone in the house, got the operator, and they traced him all the way to the squash court. And I'll never forget, he got on the phone, I said, Phil, you're not going to believe what happened to me this morning. He goes, yeah, you slept in. He hung up, and I looked at Jack and I went, wow, I tried. And so Jack and I are all covered up. We had these we had to take his shirt off because it was white, it was all bloody. So I don't have a shirt on, he doesn't have a shirt on. He's wearing these little tiny red silky running shorts, and I've got my little my little whitey tighties on. We opened the door, and honest to God, every news outlet in the North Carolina was out. There must have been 30 people out there. We end up in the newspaper looking like High Point's first gay couple coming out. We, LMA, got to the hospital. They rushed to the hospital. So, I figured, my squash is probably not going to happen. So I just went to the YMCA in High Point, took a shower. I went to the hospital, and I went to see LMA. And she was fine. And guys, I'm telling you, that old Indian tale, about you save a life, you're responsible for life. Well, it's true. She lived another 15 years, and she became like my second mom. We'd have lunch once a month. But that morning, I've never seen a woman so grateful in my life, and it changed my life and forever, because unbeknownst to us, we got nominated for Carnegie Hero Medals, and it took a year. They investigated to make sure you did everything people say you did, and this Carnegie Hero Medal is the civilian equivalent to the Medal of Honor. You got to risk your life to save someone else, and it was started back in the 19-teens when Andrew Carnegie was in Pittsburgh, and there'd been a mining disaster. 3 guys went in after their buddies, and all 3 of them died. And he was so touched by what they did that he said, we need to recognize these heroes. So this has been going on for a long time. And so you get the medal in a real big ceremony, which, it was neat. And LMA was there, and it was wonderful. And then about a week later, I get this check in the mail. And it's like for $5,000. And, I guess I was, 38 at the time, and I had 2 little kids. I see $5,000, and I'm thinking big screen TV and Disney World, And for some reason, I didn't have peace about it. And I sat on that check for a good 6 months. And one weekend, I took a bunch of kids to Windy Gap, which is a young life camp in North Carolina. And I had a bunch of high school guys. And you go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but Saturday night's when a lot of kids meet Christ, and afterwards you have quiet time. And so, I don't know why I asked them, but I said, who are your role models? Who do you guys look up to? And if you ever want to seriously get depressed, get a bunch of high school guys together and ask them who their role models were. Because, this is 1994 now. The #1 role model of these knuckleheads was a NBA player who wore women's wedding dresses and had more tats than I ever did.
That's right.
And so I'm sitting there going, wow, the world is really going to hell in a handbag here. And so that's the day I decided to start the Lighthouse Project. Okay, and I took that money, I invited Cleve McClary, who's a shot-up Marine. I think you know him, Vic, one of my dear friends. I've been friends with this guy since I was 17 years old. We did 6 schools that year. The next year we did 15 schools. The next year we did 30 schools, and we did that for 26 years. We've talked in front of over 1 million kids, and guys, none of that would have happened if we hadn't almost died that morning. So I've learned over and over again in my life that bad things do happen to good people, but God uses bad things to get him where he wants us to be. So let me wrap this up. I know I've gone too long. I brought copies of this. This is something I wrote. I do a column for the paper called Giving 101, and it's kind of I get to write about philanthropy, and it's kind of cool because I basically get to write about anything I want that I think is important. So you get a chance to, make some statements about things that should be happening in the city. But when I had my first grandchild, I wrote this as a letter to her. And it's called The Essentials of Life. Somehow this got on the internet. It's had over 3 million hits. And let me read it to you real quick. Be a person of integrity and grace. Stand up and advocate boldly for those principles you believe in. Seek out God daily and invest in causes larger than yourself. Be humble, be compassionate, and make it a habit to serve others before yourself. Be a willing mentor and share your life experience. Give others the opportunity you were given and always encourage and inspire. Dare to be courageous. Take leaps of faith. Walk through every open door. Watch carefully to see the doors God closes for you. Remember your blessings and never fail to be grateful. Love and invest in your family and friends. veterans as they are God's greatest gift in life. Face your fears, celebrate your victories, share your challenges, and know that everyone you meet is struggling with something. Admit your mistakes and strive to learn from them. Be self-sufficient, be accountable, and most of all, be helpful and faithful in all you do. Be generous, be kind, become a river to all those who cross your path. Honor and cherish those who have touched your life, and acknowledge their contributions and commemorate their memory with your words and deeds. Life is fleeting. Live each day as if it's your last, and go to your Maker with no regrets. Pass on all you have and all you are, realizing in the end, all we really get to keep is what we've given away. Those are the lessons I've learned in my life. That's what God's taught me through failure, through some of the victories, but mostly through the failures. And so regardless of where you are tonight, regardless of what your struggle is, just know God's got a plan for you. And, you know, what you're doing here as men is the most important thing you can do. You know, Greg and I, you know, we became brothers, and we've held each other accountable for 16 years. I think Greg can say anything he needs to me, and I feel like I can do the same for him. And I can't tell you, when my dad died, the first guy that called me was Greg. You know, and so that's what you need in your life. You need guys that will speak truth to you and hold you accountable. And I think that's the mission of what you're trying to do here. So I know I've gone on too long here, but I'm so excited about what you're doing. I'm honored to be a small part of it. And I'm going to be praying hard for you guys. And Pastor, I'll try and get our church involved with what you're doing. But thank you for letting me be here tonight. If any of you guys want a copy of this, I'll just leave it right here. Thank you for having me. Good to see you. I want to bring your dog home with me here. Good to see you. Thanks for having me. Really good.
Don't worry about it before we huddle up.
Well, yeah, you know what? Greg knows how to get it. Yeah, he did it around.
I'm gonna say a few
Pleasure
words
to meet you.
before we
God
go.
bless you. What you do to yourself.
Paul, you interrupted my speech, Paul.
Paul.
Paul,
Yes.
you interrupted my speech right now. Thank you, sir.
It's my pleasure.
First of all, I want to say to all y'all brothers, man, you know, I try to be that person in y'all lives. Each and every one of y'all have a personal relationship. Some way, if we don't have a relationship, I want to build a relationship. Because I want to be some type of instrument in your life like Paul was in my life. Paul helped make me who I am today, and some of you guys helped me be who I am today. Albert, you have impacted my life. You don't know how much you impacted my life just being around you and seeing you work hard to make things happen. And I don't know no other way to say it, but you know, I refuse to let you go. You know, like Paul refused to let me go, despite of what people say about me or what they say about you. I'm still your friend. I'm still here for you. I want to be that one that you can call. The men's huddle is very important. What I see is an instrument for us to be good men and good friends, and us to realize what life is all about. Being supportive of one another, coming together. We may not meet another friendship and relationship like we got here today, and we want to make it bigger, we want to make it better. And the only way we're going to do that, we got to actually give part of ourselves. You know, the biggest gift that I have is myself, and I give everything I got. I just turned 60, my birthday, May 3rd. And, some may call it old, some may call it you've been somewhere, you've been around some corner, but I say I'm thankful to be here with you brothers at the age of 60. And I hope that I pass some on to you brothers that you guys can carry on. Because if we all get together and be like Paul and be like myself and like some of you guys, man, we can make a difference in our world. We can make a difference in our community. And it starts right here with this men's huddle. I believe that we come together right now and you brothers take this real serious, because I don't get up here, I don't look for fame, I don't look for glory, I don't look for nobody to come and pat me on the back and say, good job. I'm not with the applauses, autographs, or none of that. This is a serious business, God's business. And we all got to be about God's business right now. And this men's huddle right now is something different than High Point. And all you guys make the men's huddle. It's not me. This is not my men's huddle. This is our men's huddle. We make it. If you don't go out and bring somebody, you don't talk about it, you don't get involved with some of the things that we're doing, some of the things the guys are doing with the organization and trying to help one another, brother, you use a failure to our community. So I'm asking you, brothers, to come here and build yourself. Let's sit down, let's talk about how can we make this men's huddle even better. How can we get more men in here to be dedicated, to be brothers, so we can have a story, some of the ones that Paul have. And I know some of you guys got some great stories. We want to be able to let you get up on this platform and tell your story because they are very inspiring and they change lives. So with that being said, brother, again, I thank every one of y'all. Y'all don't know this is my birthday gift to see all my brothers here with me today. And this is more, this is bigger than a lot of things that I could have offered, a gift that you could have gave me, or money, or whatever, anything that you could have did. But being here, man, and seeing you brothers come in this men's huddle and grow. And thank our brother Kevin, again, which is the bishop, who allowed us to open the door, which we are part of his. This is ours now. This is our house. And we want you guys to take it serious. We want you guys to come visit the church. Please come and visit. Hear this brother speak the word, brother. It's amazing. And I invite all you guys to come out and bring somebody, bring your family, bring somebody. It may not be important to you, but you may have a sister, you may have a brother, you may have somebody that needs this right here. Somebody needs this right here. So my announcement, we having the men's walk, which is the father and son walk, June 15th on Brentwood Street. The information will be out there. We look for all our men to come out there and bring your sons, bring your nephews. We want to show our young men what it look like for us to come together as men. And there's great things that we can do. And that's walking. Some of us been walking, Mike, you've been walking every year, right? And some of us have been walking with us for this is our 5th annual. And we have got bigger and bigger every year. So I'm asking all you brothers, bring some more men. Come out, brother. Let's support. It's only take about a 15-minute walk. We have transportation back from the walk, back to your vehicle, back on Brentwood. So we have water. We have something. We're thinking about having a DJ. We're thinking about making a big celebration. It's gonna be like 5 o'clock in the evening. So you know, with the church and everything. So brothers, again, I love y'all, brothers. Brothers, let's give some more stories, man, so we can take back to our communities and we can change some lives. And we have the next foundation that we change the lives with the men's home. So I love all you brothers. God bless you.
Oh, sorry, one more announcement. I just want to let y'all know for the next couple weeks, so June 21st, it'll be super fast, so don't worry. June 21st, we're going to have Bishop Sanders speaking for us. He's going to share a word with us. He's going to have a good word for us to have. Then June 4th, which is the next one, we'll have Buster Brown speaking as well. So invite, like Paul Commander already said, be prepared for a good word. We can huddle up. That's all I'm telling you.
Father, thank you that you know each of us. You know when we sit, when we stand, you know our thoughts even before we pray that this week we could be your man in this community. And I pray that you would see this grow. And I thank you for Greg and Bishop. And thank you for all these men in this room. God, I pray your hand be upon them.
Let's take a picture with Paul. So if you bring it on. You better get One, two, three. Break. Now, let's take a picture. Paul, come back.
Time to hold the hands.
All y'all doing the line right there. Ultra man, little bitty shoes, man. My baby. Ultra man. Come on, man.
In 3, 2, 1. Again. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, there's one more. Okay, gotcha.
You're good, you know more about my camera than I do.
That's right.
3, 2, 1. Again. 3, 2.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you. I'm gonna call you to try to see. Stop by and see what's
Yeah, like that. Mr. Decker, like Dudley Franks. I knew your dad. Yeah, great. In fact, he looked like that. That's he was a great man.
And yes, I've been working with Lander for a little bit in terms of supporting his programming, things like that. The young man who's filming is one of my mentors. Oh, yeah, indeed. And so we're doing this.
Are you still in the company?
The family business, not day to day, but what I do is I help entrepreneurs finance their $1 million projects. And so I help them.
Your dad was something that I heard him speak one night and got to talk to him a little bit. He was a good man.
Truly dynamic,
Yeah.
no question about it. And so I continue to carry on.
Yeah, I mean, you love what you're doing, yeah.
Entrepreneurship. And
Didn't you have a sister too that was?
I have two younger sisters, right? So one is Ursula, and she's dealing with the hair care process.
Right.
And then I have a younger sister, Gina, and she has her own office.
Okay. Pleasure to meet you. You know, Bob Brown's one of my dear friends. He, of course, he was Hank and Callister. He started great mechanic.
He gets tired.
What about it? I know you know the doctor. The doctor. Got his story in my office.
Yes.
It's a African American.